Hey, this is Matt once again. We're about to have a video, another paid request, this time for Joseph. Thank you so much for that. And for those interested in requesting any type of videos, topics, reactions, commentaries, what have you, feel free to send it either directly to my PayPal or join my Patreon. Both links are down below in the info box. And this is for the 1991 film, Yes, Virginia, There's a Santa Claus. Now, I will say, despite what I want to say about the film, this is still interesting to watch because it stars Charles Bronson. Death Wish films. My favorite is Death Wish 3. I also really enjoy The Evil That Men Do, Murphy's Law, 10 to Midnight. Could not get into Kinjite, but quite a few decent movies Charles Bronson was in. I didn't grow up with him as much as Clint Eastwood or Sylvester Stallone or other action stars, but I do like quite a bit of Charles Bronson. Again, my favorite top two is Death Wish 3 and The Evil That Men Do. But it was interesting because he got to play a different type of character, much more of a stretch a little bit of his acting muscle. Also, I think this was a bit cathartic for him because, like I said, this was 1991. His wife died in 1990. And in this, he's playing a columnist, a writer. His wife and kid has died. And even his wife, his kid died like a year ago. And that kind of does mirror Charles Bronson's life because his wife died in 1990. This is 91. His character's wife died a year ago, just like his actual wife died a year ago. So maybe that's why he took the role. There's a little bit of cathartic, a little bit of having to deal with what was going on in his life. And, Bronson was never Al Pacino or James Woods in terms of an actor, but I thought he did fine in this role when he was on screen. Because the film, sadly, I wasn't big on this film. I didn't hate it, but wasn't big on this film because it felt like two different movies softly put together. There was Charles Bronson as the writer. You have Ed Asner as his boss. Ed Asner, good old school actor. I think he was the voice of... Wasn't he the voice of Perry White on the 90s Spider-Man cartoon? I think that was Ed Asner. Not Perry White. That's Superman. Fuck. J. Jonah Jameson. Oh my god, Perry White. God. Superman. That's not Spider-Man. J. Jonah Jameson. Was he the voice of J. Jonah Jameson in the 90s Spider-Man? I'm going to leave that in because I fucked up. It's my fault. No one else had a gun to me saying, you better say Perry White. It's not right. Tough shit. You don't say Perry White. Yes, Perry White is now in Spider-Man. And J. Jonah Jameson is Superman. You know that. But yeah, I think Ed Asner's in the 90s Spider-Man. He's been in other stuff too. No, he was not Perry White. Although he would make a good Perry White. Anyway, you have that. You have this younger lady who, because at this point Charles Bronson's character is a drunk. For the past year he's been drinking and not writing. And this lady writes a column for him to help him out. And he's on the bottle. There's a nice scene between him and Ed Asner where Ed Asner's checking out on him. Seeing how he's doing. You're not going to do anything stupid, are you? Which, yeah, Bronson was ready to do something very specific concerning his mental thought process at that point. And I should mention this takes place in 1897. But then the other movie is Richard Thomas from the Waltons. He was in the 1990 Stephen King's It miniseries. He was in Battle Beyond the Stars from back in the day. Richard Thomas with this kind of fake-sounding Irish accent. I didn't really buy him as Irish. I thought he was trying a bit too hard. And people keep calling him names, and him and his buddy get fired, even though they don't deserve it, but they got fired. And Richard Thomas has a boy, a girl, and a wife, and he's trying to find another job. It's hard. And at one point, the little girl goes, "Is there a Santa Claus?" Kids at school said there wasn't Santa Claus, so she writes a letter to the paper. And Ed Asner gets this and gives the assignment to Charles Bronson. Now, granted, this is based on a story that heard of. I heard of the title. I think the first time I heard of it was in like an Elf. Remember Elf from Melmac, that sitcom? There's a Christmas special. I think they referenced Virginia. Yes, Virginia, there's a Santa Claus. I believe so. Don't quote me on that. I mean, I'm the guy that thought Ed Asner was Perry White. That Perry White was Spider-Man. Fuck. To tell it's late, 11:30 p.m. Should go to bed. That's okay. I'd be stupid when I wake up still. If you fix your looks, you can't fix stupid. But, like I was saying, I didn't know the original story that well, so if this is how it plays out, okay. But, like, Charles Bronson never meets Richard Thomas. He never meets the little girl. He never meets this family. There's no scenes with there's Charles Bronson looking, and then there's the family doing their thing. The only time they're together is on the fucking cover. That's the only time they're together. I thought that was a real big disconnect of the story. Because they feel like two separate things. It felt like Charles Bronson and then filmed their movie. Richard Thomas filmed their movie. And then it was like softly linked together. And really not a whole lot happens. Like, this did not even need to be 90-some, 100 minutes. It could have been 30 minutes. Richard Thomas loses a job, looks for a job. He finally gets one. Charles Bronson's a drinker, tells her that Asner gets this letter. He's a bit happier. Because we know more than likely where this is going. That Charles Bronson, he's going to read the letter, he's going to look into more of the holiday spirit, and I would assume he's going to meet with this little girl, he's going to see how the little girl interacts with their family, even though they're dirt poor, even though the dad's trying to find a job, and he's going to see Christmas through her eyes, and maybe the little girl reminds him of his kid who died, and he sees a bit of a sparkle of Christmas and the human spirit and how these folks are so upbeat despite their situations, and he's going to live vicariously through their eyes, and that's going to give him the Christmas spirit. None of that shit happens. Instead, he gets the letter, he wanders around, sees a bit of Toys for Orphans, sits down in a park, watches a couple with a baby, sees a couple of people ice skate, buys some flowers, goes to the gravesite, and then he's fine. Like, in less than 2 minutes. He gets the letter in less than 2 minutes. He's perfectly fine. And I'm like, this is something for a year he's been selling in his brain, drinking his life away. Because he gets a letter and he sees 3 things in 2 minutes of screen time, he's now changed. And he never meets the family that this whole story's about. He never meets the girl that wrote the letter. And when I mean meet, I mean them in the same frame. In this, not, here's Charles Bronson staring. Then here's the family doing their own thing. This Charles Bronson staring again. There's never actual... And the acting by some of these people are not that good. Like Richard Thomas, he's really pushing the accent. I thought it was not fluid. As it didn't feel natural. It feel very bravado, and I can't even do the Irish accent. But if he's Irish, I'm Chinese. Call me London. And the little girl was fine. The little boy was pretty fucking terrible, though. The wife was fine. Charles Bronson and Ed Asner were the better parts. I try to wish the entire movie was about them. I wish the entire movie was about this guy and his boss, his editor, going through all the letters of Christmas, and maybe one led to two, two led to four, four led to 50, and Ed Asner wants him to keep going into these letters, answering these questions, and the more Charles Bronson learns and gets to know these people, the more he regains, with the help of Ed Asner and maybe even one or two other people at the newspaper, which is The Sun. But it's not the case here. So I mean, the story felt a bit disconnect because, like I said, Charles Bronson barely does anything to get over this year-long pain and turmoil. He never meets the family like in the same frame. Any dialogue with each other, shaking hands, nothing at all. And even the Richard Thomas stuff is just, Richard Thomas, I think it's the weakest performance I've seen him in. I think he does a good job in It from 1990. He does a good job on The Waltons. Here, not so much. And he goes out, doesn't get a job, goes out, doesn't get a job. He stops a thief. At one point, the cops want him, and then he got a job in the police force. Because apparently it was that fucking easy. Okay. So yeah, if you're a hardcore Charles Bronson fan, or if you saw this somehow as a kid and you have nostalgia for it, sure. It is a made-for-TV movie. It has that low-budget look to it. There's nothing raunchy, nothing to get that angry about, but at the same time, it's just humdrum affair. Like I said, if there's more of a connect between these two sections of a story together, I think that would help a lot. If Charles Bronson went through a lot more of an adventure to get that change. Again, I would assume talked with the little girl, interacted with the girl, but none of that ever happened. Like, how is it? That would seem like the most obvious thing, and it doesn't do that. That just surprised the hell out of me. Like, what? Because they're together in the fucking poster. Unless I'm seeing this poster wrong, and you're seeing the poster wrong. But I got the poster right here. I mean, I'm sure that's for promotion, obviously. Yeah, Charles Bronson's right behind Richard Thomas and the girl. So you think, oh, well, he talks with the girl and maybe become friendly with Richard Thomas' character? No. Unless that is some type of Photoshop and maybe Charles Bronson was never in the same room as them. Maybe Richard Thomas and the girl took a picture, then Charles Bronson took a picture, and then they just placed them both. That could be the case as well. I would not be surprised if you asked Richard Thomas, he goes, I never met Charles Bronson. I would not be surprised. So, that's just me, though. So with that said, thanks for watching. Take care, and we will see you guys later.